We're headed down to the wire here in Season 7 of the NWBA. The playoffs are here. Fresher faces dominate the Ruby landscape, but could either wily veteran in King or Will make a playoff push, or would Aleph, Blades, or Earthflax end up taking their talents all the way to the NWBA Finals? Nico and Kobe both seeking redemption, looking to make it back to the big dance. Meanwhile, Luck, Ballheat, and CJ are all trying to make their first appearance in the NWBA Finals. Heartbreaks, triumphs, drama, controversy, and an all-star game for the ages. The playoff recap of NWBA Wonder Room coming up next. Wonder Room is brought to you in part by Booze Mobile and by Kurtz's Chicken. And now for your host, King Vasser. Hello everyone and welcome back to Wonder Room. It's been a little bit since we last saw each other, but of course we had all the playoffs to sit through. All of that has been decided. We have our championship matchup for tonight. The season finale is here and we are quite sure it's going to be a good one. But of course, we do have some business to attend to. The All-Star Game festivities have come and gone, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention one of the most fun nights in the NWBA. We begin in the Ruby League. First things first, it's important to note that only 12 Pokemon made it to the All-Star roster in both leagues this season. That is the lowest we have ever seen in NWBA history. Typically, the cutoff is 12, but we always end up having a little bit of overflow. But this season, there was none to be found. A very restrictive list this season, but we begin with Arcanine H of Mount Coronet, who made it in with 9 votes, alongside its teammate Gliscor with 13. Surchester ended up putting 3 representatives in this season, with Blaziken having 11 votes, Iron Thorns having 16, and Roaring Moon having 12. The top dog in the Ruby League, Amber Town, had 2 Pokemon make it in. Of course, Titan, who made it in with 21 votes, almost unanimously making it into the All-Star game, although a bit of a surprise that it did make it in unanimously, as well as its teammate Lucario getting in with 10 votes. Corway, despite being a wildcard team, also had 3 Pokemon make it into the All-Star game. Landorstirium making it in with 13 votes, Toxtricity making it in with 10, and Walking Wake making it in with 8. With Walking Wake, it's interesting. We've mentioned in seasons past there's typically 1 or 2 Pokemon in each league that makes it in off of the fear factor, so to speak. The idea of this Pokemon is very dangerous, it gets banned a lot, we don't know what exactly it's going to do, and the numbers don't always reflect that. But in this season's case, it actually does. Walking Wake was very effective in the few games that it played this season, so a more deserving All-Star than you might have seen of a Mon like that in seasons past. Slitherwing Sicily put in Pecharunt, who had 10 votes this season. Very surprising, Pecharunt more of a defensive Pokemon, but still finding a way to make it in this season. And then Slitherwing of Veilstone making it in as their lone representative with 13 votes. Important to note that Sunyshore and Black City both did not have any All-Star representation, which was unfortunate, but due to the nature of this season's votes, had that roster been extended to say 16 Pokemon, we would have likely seen both factions have at least 1 All-Star representative on the season. So, not to say that they didn't have anyone who wasn't good enough to make it in, just that because of the nature of this season, they didn't. Moving on over to the Sapphire side, we start with Mauville's 2 representatives, Basculegion Female, who had a whopping 18 votes, and Ogerpon Cornerstone, who had a whopping 17 votes, the highest vote tally of any teammates duo in the All-Star game this season. But that does not mean they're the only team to have All-Star teammates. Littleroot surprisingly puts in 2 Pokemon to the All-Star game. Cinderace got 14 votes, while Latias got 11 votes. Not often you see a team with a negative record putting in multiple Pokemon into the All-Star game. Kitakami also had 2 Pokemon in the All-Star game, Cresselia getting 10 votes while Enamorous Eye got 17 votes. New Moon, the top dog of the Sapphire League, put in 3 Pokemon. It was a bit of a question as to whether or not they were able to have any All-Stars based on how balanced their roster had been all season, and yet they are rewarded with having 3. The mascot Darkrai getting 12 votes, Keldeo getting 8, and Mudsdale getting 10. Humalau's Haxorus gets 19 votes, the most out of any Pokemon in the Sapphire League. Makes sense, Haxorus has always gotten a ton of All-Star votes, perhaps the most All-Star lock of any Pokemon in NWBA history. Hardhome's mascot Infernape makes it in with 13 votes, not too big of a surprise there. And then finally we have Miss Stralton, whose lone representative is Umbreon, getting 15 votes. Again, rare to see defensive Pokemon make it in, but perhaps Wochin make it in last season might have started a bit of a movement in the NWBA. Notably, Nat Green City is the only Sapphire League team that didn't have a single representative, in a bit of a surprise considering they had a 2020 Pokemon in Iron Treads. But again, the cutoff being 12 this season means that there are some fairly deserving Pokemon that just weren't going to make it in this season. And for the first time in NWBA history, we're actually able to cover the All-Star game itself, and what an All-Star game it was. Nico and Aleph putting on an absolute show. You see right out the gate things like Physical Toxtricity, SD on Darkrai, Ice Beam on Iron Thorns, Final Gambit on Lucario, SD on Keldeo. They were running with all sorts of crazy things, like Steel Beam on Lucario on a Lychee Berry SD Keldeo set that we talked about, for Walking Wig to come in and be Photosynthesis attack, using agility, using Hone Claws. Obviously, the narrative of this season was a whole lot of setup moves, but we saw all types of nonsense this season. You're talking about Skill Swap on Cresselia with Trick, Special Blaziken, which isn't really all that crazy, but something we haven't seen this season. Midway through the All-Star game, you see Fling Thief Darkrai come out from Nico, so him doing a lot of work with that Sapphire team. Haxorus coming in on Arcanine Age gets Will-O-Wisp just to pop Surf of all moves. And then later on, Darkrai using Focus Punch on a Snowscape Titan. And then at the end of the game, you got Sainseer Storm, Gravity, Landorus, Therian. Moving on to game 5, Roat Berry on Gliscor as it goes down to an Ice Beam. Like, when we tell you that Nico and Aleph were doing all sorts of things, of course you can't forget, gotta sneak in a Snowed Power every now and again. Of course, that was one of the themes of the season as well. You move on to game 7, and you've got Nico running a full recharge move team. Cinderace having Hyper Beam, Infernape having Blast Beam, Cresselia having Hyper Beam. Haxorus comes in after it goes down and gets the KO on Titan with Giga Impact of all moves. This for Landorus to show Outrage on the way out, by the way. Darkrai coming in, it shows off Hyper Beam, so Nico running the full gamut of recharge moves, given that he was up 4-2 at this juncture in the All-Star game, by the way. But on top of all the crazy sets that you're seeing, all the crazy moves coming out, it was a very competitive set as well. You see, there's even some bad mons happening. Powerball and Overheat both missing in a crucial juncture in Game 8. But then we go to Game 9, the final game. Ogerpon, one-on-one with Roaring Moon, goes for the Trailblaze, not realizing it's already faster. Roaring Moon popping sturdy with the Jaw Lock. And then the Ivy Cudgel doesn't KO. Roaring Moon living on 1%. So at the end of the day, the Ruby League All-Stars emerge as the winners, 5-4. Titan was the MVP, racking up 10 KOs, played in every single game, by the way. Important to note, not only did every Mon on the All-Star roster show up this All-Star game, every Mon got a KO. So good showing from Aleph and Nico, putting on a phenomenal All-Star game for the people this season. Now, with the fun and games out of the way, let's get into the meat of today's episode. We have all of the playoffs to cover. There was a lot of rejoicing, there was a lot of heartbreak, and some controversy in between a very eventful playoffs, and a lot of surprises along the way Again, this was the most wide open season in NWBA history coming into the postseason. So there was a lot of potential for things to go any type of way in the playoffs. And boy howdy, were there some twists and turns to get through. We start with the Ruby League wildcard matchup, Coroway and Veilstone walking with the lead out the gate. And you see Scarlet and Knockoff King running a defensive variant of Walking Wake. Did not opt to bring Torkoal, knowing that because of the trades in the regular season, that Veilstone was going to be able to play the Sun very well. But of course, Veilstone can operate out of Sun just fine, especially with that Terra Captain Pokkén doing a lot of damage to Walking Wake. And Azumarill, after popping the Citrus Berry, finally takes the threat out with a Play Rough. Thunder's Therian comes in. Klefki takes a lot of damage from the Thunderbolt, but you know that this thing is locked and loaded with screens. But Will takes advantage of that, showing sub-SD Rhyperior. So a lot of very interesting sets coming out from both parties. EQ from a +2 Rhyperior, KOing Azumarill even behind the Reflect. Screamtail comes in, takes the Scald. Klefki comes back in, doesn't take anything from that Psychic, screen still being up. So that allows Klefki to get off a Spike. Moltres comes in now on Rhyperior and pops the sub with Scorching Sands, but Rhyperior locked and loaded with that Rock Blast. And you gotta figure it's loaded dice because all 5 hits connect, so Moltres goes down. Wake has to come back in. Screamtail takes another Scald. It's at 32% now, but it can definitely threaten Walking Wake. Gets off a big Psychic. And then King decides to sack Walking Wake to bring Kleavor back in, finally get some momentum going. Kleavor U-turns on the Screamtail and takes it out. And then Toxtricity is able to Terra Normal and get the KO with the Boom Burst. Dragalge comes in. You gotta figure this thing is AV. King reads it correctly. Klefki's able to come in on a Sludge Bomb, get up a Light Screen, and even dies to the flip turn, so Kleavor is able to come in and get more momentum for Coroway. And 2 Stone Axes is gonna be enough to take out the Dragalge. So in comes the Heatran to take all that hazard damage, and while it doesn't get knocked out by the Stone Axe, it reveals that it's Spec Steel Beam, so Kleavor goes down behind the screen, but so does Heatran. And because of the hazards and the screen, Toxtricity is able to live the T-Bolt and get the KO with the Boom Burst, so Coroway survives and eliminates Veilstone in a very heated wildcard matchup. Kleavor and Toxtricity both racking up 2 KOs. King moves to 5-3 all time in the playoffs, while Will is still seeking for his first playoff victory since Season 1. Sapphire wildcard matchup, Kitakami and Hearthome. Braviary and Excadrill the leads out the gate. And you know that Life Orb, Sheer Force, Braviary H is going to be a problem to deal with, doing a lot of damage right out the gate. Heat Waves, Hurricanes, crucially misses a second one on Hatterene, so Hatterene's going to be able to get a little healthy. But there still needs to be a consistent answer to Braviary H, and there isn't one, so Salamence goes down. Raikou has to come in to revenge KO, goes for the Volt Switch, Bellybolt comes in, takes it quite easily. Hydrapple comes in on the Excadrill, takes the Iron Head, and is gonna threaten back with a Hydro Pump. Hydrapple showing off that coverage. Vaporeon comes in on Hatterene, who's able to go for a Draining Kiss. And because of the nature of CJ's team, this Hatterene was very annoying to deal with. Draining Kiss was healing a lot of HP back for Hatterene. And even though Vaporeon has Haze for the potential Calm Mind, you see that Hatterene is virtually up to full after just a few turns of being in because of how much damage it's doing and getting back off the Draining Kiss. And Enamorus comes in and does a decent chunk with Sludge Bomb, but Draining Kiss heals so much back that Enamorus is not going to be able to kick up the KO. So Garg has to come in, finally force the Hatterene out, goes for a Salt Cure, but that Samurott is locked and loaded with a Covert Cloak. Standard counter Garg tech coming through on the Water type. So Samurai H is able to get up a Ceaseless Edge Spike, and then shows the mixed coverage Ice Beam taking Hydrapple out. So Enamorus has to come in to revenge KO, pops a Sash on Infernape, who goes for the Overheat. Vaporeon able to take that, although it does do a healthy 33%, but then Infernape reveals that it's Endeavor as well. So Vaporeon going for the Wish, and then Ball Heat reading the Protect, going right into Raikou. So Bellbolt has to come back in. It is Boots, so it's not going to take that crucial Spikes damage, but it's going to allow Excadrill to come in off a Volt Switch. But CJ reads that Ball Heat, goes for an Iron Head and gets off the Soak, and then is able to Volt Switch out the next turn and bring Braviary back in. And it lands the Hurricane this time, so Hatterene finally goes down. Raikou comes back in to Volt Switch out on the Belly Bolt. And Infernape comes back in, but the Overheat is going to be enough to KO Bella Bolt, so that's a huge part of Kitakami's defense going down. Endeavor from Infernape on the next turn, but perhaps a misplay here from CJ does not go for the Protect, it goes for the flip turn, so Vaporeon's going to have to get sacked to the spikes on the next turn from Raikou anyway. Garg has to be the one to come in and still takes a healthy 33% from Raikou to get up rocks. But now it's Samurai H's time to get some offense in. Nothing can really take Water Move, so Garg has to go down to a Razor Shell. Enamorus comes in, Infernape gets sacked on the rocks, and because Heart Home has the numbers advantage, it's only a matter of time before the victory is within sight. Raikou picks up the KO with the Volt Switch, Braviary H has to come in, and that Razor Shell chip is more than enough for Exeggutor to come in after Samurott goes down and pick up the final KO with Iron Head. So Heart Home takes the wild card matchup against Kitakami. It was CJ's first playoff appearance and very well fought, but ultimately it's Balhi and Heart Home who gets their first career playoff win and moves on to face the top-seeded New Moon Darkrai in League Semis. On to League Semis, Amber Town and Koroway. Amber Town, of course, won both their very close encounters in the regular season, but they did not have to deal with the Terra Captain Vileplume in the regular season, which out the gate forces Como out and gets off a Toxic on Slowking. But of course, Slowking brings in the big man to Titan, who goes straight for the belly drum. But King is locked and loaded with the Mirror Herb Tech. And while the fake out from the Amber Palm is not going to pick up the KO, the upper hand right after to counter the Ice Shard is. So that's a huge lead for Koroway right out the gate. Dragapult getting its Dragon Darts blocked by Vileplume, who's able to get off a lot of damage on Slowking before it Chilly Receptions out into Gastrodon, who has to Terra Poison to stop the bleeding. So Aleph is able to get up rocks. Landorus Therian comes in, and while that is red with a nice Ice Beam from Gastrodon, Aleph does not switch out on the next turn, so Gastrodon goes down to the EQ. Dragapult has to come in and goes for the Phantom Force, so King is able to get up rocks and switch into Amber Palm, who's going to block that every time. The lack of Power Herb being very crucial for that Dragapult. And so someone has to come in and take a triple Axle. Como certainly can't take two, even with the single hit on the first one. So that's a huge lead for Koroway, now up 6-3 after just 17 turns of play. Dragapult's able to U-turn Lucario in, who picks up the KO on Landorus with the E-Speed. But Torkoal's going to be able to come in right afterwards, lives the Stone Edge quite easily, and picks up the KO with the Lava Plume, boosted by the Sun. So now Slowking comes in, has to slack off while Torkoal is able to get up rocks. And then just a few turns later, Azumarill comes in on the Slowking, and while it does get burned by Scald, it's not going to matter too much. The knockoff plus that toxic damage doing enough to KO Slowking. Aleph concedes the first game, and so Koroway goes up 1-0. Vileplume, the lead on the second game, Toxic Slowking immediately, who brings in Terrakion, who was a switch in for Como. Gets up a big Stone Edge on Landorus Therian, but here's the question. Rocks are gonna go up, but what is the answer to EQ U-turn from Landorus Therian? Slowking takes a lot of damage, and he's gonna have to go into Gastrodon, who immediately terrors again to get up their own rocks. Playoff is doing a healthy 50% from Azumarill, but of course you know any Gastrodon worth its weight is going to carry recover. So King has to switch back out into Landorus on another Gastrodon recover, but now we actually have to answer the question, who takes the EQ? Slowking takes 31%, but due to rocks and Toxic Chip and being slower than Landorus, it's going to take a huge amount before able to Chilly Reception out. Trackdown comes back in this time on Azu, but Aleph double switches to bait the Aqua Jet, get off the Storm Drain for Gastrodon. But you see that the Ice Beam is only doing 21% to Vileplume. So between Lefty's recovery and Strength Sap, Vileplume is going to be able to stay healthy in front of this thing. So we're at a bit of a stalemate for the time being. Azumarill comes back in on an Ice Beam, which does crit, but it's not going to pick up the KO, and King is willing to sack Azumarill to knock off the Gastrodon. So now Landorus is back in. Once again, someone's got to take an EQ. Aleph just stays in. Gastrodon goes down. So in comes the Titan with one more turn of snow. and goes immediately for the Icicle Crash, not wanting to set up in front of the Ambipom. But King's last move is Endeavor. So Ambipom is going to go down to the EQ, but not before getting Titan well into range. Out of having to switch out to bring in Slowking, who is going to be able to take a Lava Plume from Torkoal, then swaps back into Terrakion on the Rapid Spin. King stands his ground, but the Stone Edge is going to crit, so Torkoal goes down there, but that's fine because that means someone else has to take an EQ. Slowking comes in, and after the Rocks EQ and Toxic Damage, it goes down, so the Titan has to come back in, and then the Icicle Crash misses from the Titan, so it goes down to an EQ. Things are falling apart for Ambrit Town. Moltres comes in on Lucario and flashes the red card, so it swaps it out. Dragapult goes for the Phantom Force because there's no Ambipom on the screen, but Moltres does have Roost, so that's not going to work either. Terrakion has to come in. King switches out into Landorus. Terrakion is faster, but the Stone Edge is not going to pick up the KO, even with the crit, so Landorus picks up another KO with the EQ. In comes Lucario, who picks up the KO with the Ice Punch. King at this point content to just let Mon stay in. But Moltres goes down to the Stone Edge, which does hit, so now it's just down to Vileplume. But the Effect Spore comes in clutch, putting Lucario to sleep on the Strength Sap, so King gets up to full. Lucario stays asleep the next turn, doesn't get KO'd by the Moonblast, so it is going to get off a little bit of chip with that E-Speed before going down. But at this point, Vileplume is relatively, not even relatively, very healthy. So it comes down to a Dragapult Phantom Force. And because of the leftovers recovery, it's not going to pick up the KO, so Vileplume gets rid of Dragapult with the Moonblast, and Koroway wins 2-0, finally getting the win over Ambrit Town. Granted, it was very close throughout the season. They finished 6-6 in games. Koroway moves on to the Ruby League Finals and notably holds the Ruby League MVP Titan to 0 points in its playoff debut. And now begins the controversial stuff. We start with Sirchester and Mount Coronet, and right out the gate, the Scarf, Regidrago comes through and takes Roaring Moon out the game immediately. So an early lead for Mount Coronet. Arcanine able to sub up after blocking Will-O-Wisp, lands the Head Smash on Tornadus Therian, so it goes down. Blaziken has to come in. CC is going to do a healthy chunk to Gliscor, but of course that's a Gliscor. So that Poison Heal is going to start coming through. Ogerpon comes in, has to take the Facade. And on the next turn, Drifblim comes in as Ogerpon goes for the SD. And it lives to play rough and then sets up a Tailwind. And then goes for Memento immediately after. So even though Ogerpon, thanks to his Defiant ability and another SD, is going to get up to +6, it also means that Glacier is going to be able to come in and outspeed this thing. So Icicle Crash picks up the KO, Weezing comes back in, and then gets taunted, so Blaziken has to come in, takes a lot of damage from the Icicle Crash before finally taking Glacier out with a close combat. But at this point, Mount Coronet already has a substantial lead. Weezing comes in to block the Scale Shot from Regidrago, but Earth reads the switch and takes out Blaziken with the Scale Shot, so Arcanine comes in, Oricorio comes in on that, on the double. Head Smash misses on the Terra, but Earth saves his Terra, uses the Terra normal E-Speed, which means it's going to be able to live the Revelation Dance, and then the second E-Speed is going to pick up the KO crit or not on Oricorio. So at this point, the game is basically over, but Earth brings in Regidrago just to enact a little bit of bad matters. This is not where the controversy lies. Where the controversy lies was in the nature of the set itself, as Arcanine goes down after getting up some Head Smash chip, which is more than enough for Kyurem to pick up the KO with the Iron Head. This was not, in fact, a best of 3. This was a best of 1. The commissioners of the league putting a rule in place this postseason in order to spur some urgency from the players to get their bans in time, enacted a deadline, which meant that any teams that did not meet it would have to forfeit a game in the playoffs. Sirchester and Mount Coronet willingly chose not to ban in order to play a best of 1. So as a result, Mount Coronet essentially gets a free trip to the Ruby League Finals. But the controversy would not stop there. New Moon and Hearthome would not be able to meet the ban deadline either. And down 0-1 against a D-Ding Dragonite is not what you want to see. Salaman's having to Terra Water immediately and Dragon Tail the Dragonite out. Overcoil is in, puts up the spikes. Infernape comes in, puts up rocks. Salamence has to come back in to deal with this Dragonite, but it's doing quite an effective job. Dragon Tails Dragonite out again, and because the rocks are up, Dragonite is not going to be able to come back in if it's not Boots. And sure enough, after Clodsire blocks a flip turn from Keldeo, it does go down. So Dreadnought comes in and immediately Shell Smashes up. Clodsire going for the EQ, and because it's Water Absorb, it means it's not unaware, so it's going to go down to the EQ. T-Tar comes in, but then Balhi pivots to Salamence right after, so Salamence goes down to the EQ plus Sand Chip, which allows Sand Rush Excadrill to come in and pick up the KO with the Earthquake. So in comes Keldeo, Decidueye comes in to help deal with that, takes a Hydro Pump, does quite a lot of damage, but Darkrai is the switch in, takes a lot from the Giga Drain, so Decidueye is going to get up to a relatively healthy percent before T-Tar comes back in, takes that Dark Pulse quite easily, but it's not going to take a Focus Blast. So Tyranitar goes down, Excadrill comes back in, it's only got 2 turns of sand left, so Darkrai goes down, in comes Superior. The Iron Head doesn't do enough and doesn't flinch, so even though Excadrill lives the Leaf Storm, the sand is out, so Superior is going to be able to clean up, takes care of Excadrill, takes care of Decidueye, and just in case the Infernape was Sash, the spikes means that it's also going to go down, so perhaps the most popular player in the league, somewhat unceremoniously, gets dumped on his head 2-0 by New Moon. Nico makes his second straight league finals appearance, moves to 4-1 all time against Balhi. And the Heaters eliminated from playoffs in quite unpopular fashion due to a quite unpopular ruling. The final league semifinal matchup, Mauville and Humalao. Mauville, similar case to Ambrit Town and Coroway, won both regular season sets 2-1, so this would be on paper a very close matchup. And you see Deoxys defense, the lead for Mauville, did not get playing time in the regular season, but it's got a lot of great traits. It's able to put up rocks, it's able to teleport out, which means that Flygon is able to get up a DD and pick up the KO on Primarina, giving Mauville the early lead. Sinister comes in and takes a lot of damage from the dual wing beat, but is able to strength sap that all back and get right back up to full. And then immediately go for the setup, Iron Defense and Calm Mind coming through from the Sinister as Deoxys D goes for a knockoff. So, Sinister, preying on the fact that Mauville doesn't have a Dark type on their roster, going for a setup with Shadow Ball, but because Deoxys defense is locked and loaded with Nightshade, it's going to do a lot of set damage to Sinister, and because Deoxys D does not have a lot of attack, even though Sinister is eventually going to be able to pick up the KO here, it's not going to be very full by the time it does get the KO, down to just 18% after Deoxys defense messes around. So Bastion Legion Female is going to be able to come in and scare it out, but that's no big deal. Chansey can eat that right up. Puts up rocks, and then goes into Valiant on a very crucial switch in, because Flygon got caught Dragon Dancing, so you know the Encore is going to be able to come out. Logan wisely brings Bolt in, but unwisely goes for Thunderclap right after, so Valiant's able to Encore that, and it's time to get the party started. And then Logan doesn't Terra Steel, so Flygon goes down to the +2 Moonblast. Pelipper is going to have to come in and go down to a Thunderbolt just to get Bastion Legion Female in to outspeed this Valiant. So Sinister is the sack. Bastion Legion Female Terras because there's no other Terra to be had. Chansey's able to come in. And even in the rain and Terra Water boosted, it's going to be able to easily live the Surf and start soft boiling up to full. And at this point, it's a matter of time before Chansey's able to safely Thunder Wave the Bastion Legion Female and continue to heal up. So now Raging Bolt's going to have to come in, and on turn 30, Chansey switches out to Indeedee Female as Bolt goes for a Calm Mind. Light Screen comes up so Indeedee lives, and then Healing Wishes out as Raging Bolt goes for another Calm Mind, so that's an avenue for Valiant to come right back in and go for another Encore. And at this point, It's an Iron Valiant sweep impending. After one Calm Mind, Bastion Legion Female goes down to a Thunderbolt. Zapdos does not go down to a Moonblast, but the light screen is still up, so Valiant easily lives the Hurricane. The second Moonblast takes care of Zapdos. Raging Bolt certainly has no answer for it, and so Humalao takes the first game quite convincingly. On to game 2, Magnezone the swap for Deoxys defense, which means that no rocks are going to get up for Mauville's side. A very crucial decision being made there from Logan. Some early switching back and forth to position Magnezone in on Primarina, but that's just another Mon for Chance to be able to come in and eat off of. So in the early game, Mauville trying to position Flygon in, but it's not going to be able to KO the Primarina at +1 because Primarina's at full, and because of the rain, the Surf's going to take care of Flygon. So now, some more back and forth thing. Chansey able to soft boil up. U-turn comes out from Zapdos as rocks go up on Humalao's side. Chansey easily lives a body press from Magnezone, so there's going to have to be some more switching around from Mauville as Humalao has quite the early advantage. On turn 14, Bastion Legion Female comes in, so Sinister has to swap out into Chansey. Legion flip turns out into Raging Bolt, but it's going to have to start Calm Minding to get things done. Chansey able to get off some damage after healing. Lives a T-Bolt quite easily, gets Parrot though, so that's going to complicate matters a little bit. Sokobi utilizing Natural Cure, goes into Primarina, sacks it, brings in Indeedee Female this time, gets up a light screen, goes for another Healing Wish. So Mienchao's going to come in, and then a brain fart from Logan going for the Thunderclap being blocked by Psychic Terrain, so Mienshao picks up the KO. Pelipper comes in, Sinister is able to take the Healing Wish, Pelipper U-turns out into Zapdos, but at this point, the light screen is up, Hurricane's not doing any damage to Sinister that's meaningful, so Zapdos goes down to a Shadow Ball. Bastion Legion Female isn't doing anything to the Chansey, and Logan concedes game 2. So Humalao moves on to the Sapphire League Finals, Kobe's third career appearance in that round of the playoffs. A great season from Logan and Mauville, but unfortunately, they fall as the 2 seed to Humalao, eliminated from the playoffs. Ruby League Finals, Mount Coronet and Coroway, and right out the gate, Ambipom posing a big threat to Mount Coronet. Torterra has to Terra immediately, but King wisely goes for the fake out instead of the triple axle. Brings in Toxtricity, who has Mirror Herb locked and loaded, so King for the second playoff set in a row has Mirror Herb tech for setup sweepers. So Poltegeist has to come in and go for Memento just to get Toxtricity down to regular levels. Toxapex comes in on an Arcanine H head smash and is able to recover up. Reuniclus having to go for a Calm Mind sweep, but Toxtricity is also locked and loaded with Encore. So Reuniclus is going to be locked into Calm Mind for a bit here. King brings in Landorus that also has Mirror Herb, but that's not the important thing. What's important is that Landorus can U-turn out into Toxtricity and lock Reuniclus right back into a Calm Mind. Doesn't matter how many boosts it's going to be able to set up. So Ambipom comes in, goes for the Terra Ice triple axle, and it is going to be able to pick up the KO. So a very early lead here for the workers. Toxapex comes back in, takes a head smash, gets off a Surf on Ursaluna. Landorus comes in on that, and you see lefties and then body slam from the Ursaluna, so it's not the standard Guts Facade set. It's instead a bulk up leftovers set. King going for the taunt with Landorus. Earth wisely going for the body slam. So Lando U-turns out. Klefki comes in, does get paired by the body slam, but it at the very least is going to be able to get up the reflect, which is the most important thing. So Klefki switches out into Azumarill on the bulk up. It's locked and loaded with a balloon, so Ursaluna has to go for a body slam, and that's enough for Azu to go for the belly drum behind the reflect. And even at +2, and Ursaluna is not going to take a liquidation on the speed tie. Arcanine comes in, and because it already terrored, it can't terror normal E-Speed for the KO. So Azu picks up the KO with Aqua Jet, and at that point, Earth just concedes the first game. On to game 2, Ambipom lead again, this time on Poltegeist, and because of the weak armor ability and all 3 hits of triple axle landing, Ambipom immediately picks up the KO on Poltegeist. So Corway once again up to a huge lead in game 2. Some maneuvering back and forth, Klefki putting up the screen, Glasgow putting up spikes, but it is faster than Landorus, so it is going to get up a second layer, and then Earthflax content to just stay in an Earthquake to live out the taunt, but of course Ambipom is going to be able to come in off the U-turn and go straight for a triple axle. Arcanine H is going to be able to live, but all that chip plus rocks puts it in a bad way. But as Landorus Therian comes in, Clear Amulet blocks the stat drop, and Arcanine reveals that it's Morning Sun, so at the very least some longevity is in play here for Mount Coronet in Game 2. Landorus Therian gets off quite a few Earthquakes on an Ursaluna, and then reads the Gliscor switch on turn 13, U-turns out, back into Ambipom. Someone's got to take a triple axle, but because Earth stays in and protects on the first turn to get some HP back, King stays in, reading the fact that Earthflax would think that he would switch out, so Ambipom picks up the KO on Gliscor. Landorus Therian comes in to get sacked to the head smash from Arcanine 8, so Azumarill can come back in. Terra Normal from Arcanine, but the head smash crucially misses, so it goes down to a liquidation. Reuniclus has to come in, go straight for the stored power just to try to get some type of chip on this thing, but it's going to go down to another liquidation after the crazy roll. Ursaluna can't get the power on the body slam, so it goes down, and so it's all up to a lone Ditto that's going to have to transform into a neutral Azumarill, and a play rough from the Azu into a Toxapex Rocky Helmet is all she wrote for this one. An absolute dominant victory from Koroway. King advances to his second career NWBA Finals appearance. Azumarill and Ambipom getting more points than should be possible off of strictly KOs. Neither Pokemon went down. Mount Coronet unfortunately suffers the biggest win differential defeat in NWBA playoff history in their playoff elimination. The final matchup of the playoffs, Sapphire League Finals, New Moon and Humalau. Out the gate, Chansey and Overcool exchanging hazards, and that would be the big story of this set. Hazard play proving to put Humalau on quite a timer. Early going, you see the Spikes SD, a favorite of Nico's, coming out from the Overquill, and unfortunately for Humalau, it doesn't get parried, so Overquill able to pick up the first KO by taking care of Incineroar. Mienshao, at the very least, able to U-turn on Overquill, pick up the KO, bring in Sinistra, as Dragonite comes in and reveals that it's Sub-Fly. This is a set that used to get a lot of play back in the day. Not really something that you see in the NWBA, but Nico has brought it out before this season, and it's proving to be very effective in the playoff set against Humalau. Chansey is at the very least able to break the sub with Seismic Toss, but after +2, Dragonite can outspeed and outdamage anything on Humalau's side. So Golden Goal has to come in, gets off a Shadow Ball on the sub, but Kobe has to play a guessing game as to whether or not Dragonite is going to sub or to fly. So the fly comes through, Golden Goal has to go for a Make It Rain. It's not going to pick up the KO, and then crucially, Nico, wanting to maximize the HP he gets back, goes for another fly, takes care of Golden Go. So Mienshao has to come in, and because Dragonite's at +2, even a Scarf Mienshao can't pick up the KO with Ice Spinner, so Mienshao goes down, and Kobe concedes the first game. So we move to game 2, Keldeo and Incineroar the leads. Nico flip turning out into Overquill on the Sinistra, gets up a layer of spikes as Kobe goes for a Scald, trying to get a burn off on this thing potentially, is able to easily take the crunch thanks to the Cobra Berry. Still doesn't get a burn from the Scald, but at the very least is going to be able to Strength Sap back up to full. Mienshao comes in on turn 5 as Overquill goes for an SD, but because Nico knows that this thing is Scarf, he brings in Clefable, who is at the very least able to get some Rocky Helmet Chip on the Mienshao and then put up rocks. So hazards once again starting to stack up for Humalau's side. Chansey able to get up the T-Wave on Overquill and then put up its own rocks. Gets up some good damage thanks to the Seismic Toss. And Nico's luck starting to run afoul, gets fully parried and then misses the gunk shot, so he's only able to get off a crunch before Chansey's able to pick up the KO on turn 12. So in comes Mudsdale. Sinistra's the swap in for that. Able to block the body press, but you see all that hazard damage already proving to be very important. Sinistra having to go immediately for a Strength Sap on Superior. Incineroar the switch in for that, takes the Leaf Storm, and then Nico stays in, goes for another Leaf Storm, as Incineroar U-turns out into Mienshao. Clefable comes back in, as Mienshao U-turns back out, and so in comes Gholdengo on the balloon, so it doesn't care about the spikes on the ground. Keldeo comes in, Gholdengo goes for a nasty plot, and then the Specs Hydro Pump low rolls from Keldeo, so Gholdengo picks up the KO with the Shadow Ball. Superior's gonna have to come in and revenge KO with the Leaf Storm. So Mienshao comes in, Nico deciding that this is the turn once and for all to find out if this thing is scarfed, which it is. Mienshao picks up the KO, Sinister comes in, but so does Dragonite. Substitute, at the very least, gets broken by Hex. Nico goes for the fly the next turn. Kobe content to sack Chansey thanks to hazards and flies, so Dragonite picks up yet another KO, but in comes Mienshao, who you know is scarfed, so Clefable has to come in. Nico not wanting to mess around, going into Clefable immediately, and then able to T-Wave the Incineroar right after, goes for the Moonlight. Incineroar able, at the very least, to knock off the helmet, so now Mienshao is going to be able to live a little bit, even if it scares out the Dragonite, but that's not what's important. What is important is the Haxorus coming in and revealing that it's Terra Ground and not Terra Steel, so it's able to block the Thunder Wave. Haxorus able to get off 2 Dragon Dances, lives the Moonblast. The Earthquake is going to pick up the KO on Clefable. And then Mudsdale goes down to the Outrage, but not before taking Haxorus with it thanks to the Rocky Helmet chip, but at that point it's not going to matter. Mienshao, knowing that it's Scarf, is going to pick up the KO with the Ice Spinner, so Humalao beautifully answers back in Game 2. Same leads in Game 3, this time Humalao stays in. Incineroar gets off a Will-O-Wisp on Clefable, which isn't going to do much to a Magikarp Clef, at least not right now. In exchanging of rocks, Dragonite comes in, goes straight for the DD on the Seismic Toss, and then blocks the T-Wave the next turn thanks to the Substitute. So it's able to get up to that very crucial +2 as Chansey breaks the sub. Incineroar is the switch in as Dragonite goes for Fly. Kobe content to sack Incineroar just to bring Gholdengo in, as that's the only thing that can stop Humalao's season from going under right now. Nico goes for the sub, which is broken by the Shadow Ball, but Kobe crucially doesn't read the Fly, so Gholdengo is going to have to take this damage and go straight for the Shadow Ball instead of to make it rain. But that was a bluff on Kobe's part. Nico greedily going for another Fly as Gholdengo reveals that it has recovered, so Kobe's able to get the KO on the Dragonite, which very well could have picked up the KO on Gholdengo with the EQ. Superior goes for a Leaf Storm, Chansey able to take that. Gets off a Thunder Wave on Overqwil once again. Overqwil getting parried again, so not able to go for a Spike. And then on the next turn, he gets full parried again, so the aggressive play from Kobe pays off. Gholdengo is able to pick up the KO with the Make It Rain on Overqwil, so no spikes go up. Superior has to come back in, goes to the Leaf Storm on the Chansey, is going to be able to pick up the KO after 2, and it was in fact revealed that this was Specs Superior afterwards, but the Haxorus has First Impression as the coverage move, so a beautiful lesson in set building coming through for Kobe and Muffin, building a DD Haxorus that has First Impression as a coverage move, and as a result, the +1 Haxorus is able to pick up the KO on Mudsdale thanks to his EQs and pick up a lot of damage on Clefable before finally going down. Gholdengo comes in, is going to threaten a Shadow Ball, which does a lot of damage to the Keldeo before it goes down to an Air Slash. Mienshao's the switch in. Keldeo has to go down because this thing is Scarf, so CC gets the job done. All that's left is Clefable that has to pray for Moonlight and Thunder Wave to carry it into the NWBA Finals. And at this juncture, Nico's luck completely runs dry. Sinister has to get full parried to give Clef a fighting chance, and it's not going to matter because Sinister is going to break through every single para turn. Nico praying, hoping for a break, isn't gonna get one, is gonna end up running out of Moonlights. Sinister still, through sheer strength of will, refuses to get full parried, takes out Clefable with the final Hex, and so as a result, Humalao moves on to the NWBA Finals, the second appearance of Kobe's career. Yet another phenomenal season coming through from Nico. Dragonite putting in so much work, but unfortunately it's just not enough. Nico's gonna have to wait at least one more season for his long-awaited, long-desired NWBA championship. So with that, we have our championship matchup set. Let's take one last look at how we got here and what we could possibly expect from our championship matchup tonight. A couple of things to note here as we take one last look at the playoff bracket. Koroway being the Ruby League champion means that for the second season in a row, we have a wild card team in the NWBA finals. That is the third time overall in NWBA history. Remember, Kaskaraffa did it last season out of the Sapphire League, and the New Moon Nightmares in Season 3 also did it out of the Sapphire League. So this is the first Ruby League wildcard team to make it all the way to the NWBA Finals. Humalau being the 3 seed out of the Sapphire League means that we have a very rare instance in which no 1 seed makes it all the way to the NWBA Finals. It's only the second time this has happened. The first time being Season 5, where the 2 seed Sunnystar Supercharge and the 2 seed Verbank Venushak made it to the NWBA Finals. So, interesting history here. The lowest combined seeding in NWBA Finals history being a 384. Another wildcard team makes it in. And notably, the first time in NWBA history that both GMs that are in the NWBA Finals have been there before. Every season since Season 2, because everyone's first season was Season 1, we have had a newcomer, or not necessarily a newcomer, but at the very least, someone who has never made it to the big dance before, make it. No such thing this season. 2 old veterans, 2 players that have been there before. So that in and of itself means that there has been a lot of history set in this season's playoff bracket, which should come to no surprise. We did mention this was the most wide open season in NWBA history, so it shouldn't really surprise anyone that all of that history has already been set. Heading into tonight's championship matchup, let's take a look at the tail of the tape between these 2 teams. Humalau has the slight edge on paper. They have a better record, better game count, better win differential than Koroway. Their faction KDA is higher, although Koroway does have the advantage in the team points per game. Haxorus of Humalau has the most KOs among either team and the most points among either team, while Landersterian of Koroway has the most assists of either team. Important to note that both of these GMs have been to the finals. Where they differ is that Koroway and King were successful. Granted, King was the GM of the Snowball City Savants at the time, but the GM remains the same. King is 1-0 in the finals, having won in Season 3. Kobe's lone appearance in Season 2 resulted in a loss. Obviously, you take a look at these rosters, a lot of killers on each side. Koroway, of course, has the potential to run Sun offense if they want to, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of balance here. Klefki's been really good for support. You've got mons like Toxapex and Moltres that have been very good defensively. Valpum, who can do it on both sides of the ball, either being defensive or as a Sun sweeper, and a lot of talented offensive playmakers like Azumarill, Azulf, Toxtricity, and Terra Captain Ambipom. Over on Humalau's side, Kobe has changed this roster quite a bit. In fact, both of these GMs have changed their rosters a ton over the course of the season. But for Humalau, of course, Golden Go and Iron Valiant being the top 2 dogs on the roster. You've got the Terra Captain, Haxorus. You've got a potential in Psychic Terrain offense between Indeedee and Armaroos. Chansey, Donphan, and Sinister have been very annoying defensively, as well as Incineroar. There's always the potential for Webs from Vikavolt. Overall, both these rosters can do a lot of different things. These GMs have been around the block. They've done a lot of different things. We'd like to think there's an ever so slight edge in Humalau's favor heading into tonight's matchup, given that when these 2 teams played, it was in fact in Week 5, and Humalau did win that matchup 2-0. But of course, regular season and postseason are 2 completely different animals. At the end of the day, we are certain of one thing. should be a phenomenal matchup, and there should be almost no doubt that this one will go the distance to 5 games. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. The Season 7 NWBA Finals coming up in just a little bit. We'll see you soon.